Harvard's great SAT ACT 180. That is the topic of today's video. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach. You can learn more about me and how you can work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process on my website, which is collegemeister.com. Today is April 11th, 2024, and shocking news out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, as Harvard, which had vowed to remain test optional under its former regime for at least 2 more admission cycles, has made the decision today on a Thursday morning to declare that as of the upcoming 2024-2025 admission cycle for fall 2025 entry for first-year applicants, Harvard is SAT required again, ACT required again. You can and should submit an SAT or ACT score to Harvard if you are applying as a first-year applicant starting in August 2024. Now, this is major. Of course, Dartmouth, Brown, and Yale have also returned to one way, shape, or form being test required again in the 2024-2025 admission cycle, but all the experts said that that was it, because it seemed like that was it, at least from the Ivy League. But Harvard has gone into reverse, or otherwise known as a 180, basically. They are completely backtracking on what they had promised the counseling community, as they like to call it, for the past several years, which is they were going to remain test optional. The argument is, and I will include the actual official statement from Harvard below in a link, but basically the argument is, which is of course true, but they've obscured the truth for so long that it's sort of surprising that it's coming out of Harvard. But the truth is that of all the elements of the first-year application process to any selective college or university in the United States, the least gameable, the least fakeable, the least capable of being altered by true privilege or wealth is one's SAT or ACT scores. And therefore, Harvard wants to see them again. Now, if for some reason the student is in a very isolated part of the world, or maybe even the United States, and is unable to find the ability to actually sit for an SAT or ACT, Harvard, similar to some of the other schools that have gone back to being test required, has announced that it will allow students to apply without an SAT or ACT score during the 24-25 admission cycle, as long as instead of the SAT or ACT score, the student is willing and able to submit the AP scores that he or she has earned, IB scores and or predictions that he or she has earned or so far received, as well as national testing, A-levels. Other options are available to international students. IELTS, Duolingo, English test, and TOEFL are not suitable substitutes for the SAT or ACT if you find yourself in an exceptional circumstance where you are unable to test. So there you go. We have half of the Ivy League that has gone back to being test required for the 24-25 admission cycle. Again, to repeat, this includes Dartmouth, Yale, Brown, and Harvard, Penn, Princeton, Columbia, and what's the other one? Penn, Princeton, Columbia, and Cornell. That's the other one. Those 4 remain test optional for the 2024-2025 admission cycle, at least as of today. I would assume that they are going to remain test optional, but look, because Harvard has basically completely taken back what it said it was going to do, anything is possible. Harvard, of course, has received a great deal of bad press in recent months for different things related to its former president, as well as some antics of students on campus. And I have long argued that when you have a significant minority of students on campus who have been accepted for reasons other than their objective academic strength, which of course the SAT and ACT capture quite well, you're going to get different types of students on campus, and they're going to have different value systems and behaviors than students who've all been accepted, or at least the vast majority of whom have been accepted via the former regime before the 2020-2021 admission cycle, when basically, with the exception of a handful of extremely wealthy slash powerful slash athletic and frankly even underrepresented minority students, the vast majority of students still were able to produce very impressive test scores. Now, interestingly, like Yale, like some of these other schools, in announcing this decision, Harvard has basically also said that, look, we're going to consider your test scores in the context of your environment and your background. So this is not a huge, massive win for the meritocracy, insofar as basically Harvard is saying in the same press release that, and again, you can read the full press release below this video, that if you're poor, if you can show us that you go to a school where it's very poor performing, if you are from a community that this Harvard has deemed to be underrepresented or maligned slash disrespected slash discriminated against for whatever reason, Harvard is going to have different expectations of your SAT scores or ACT scores than someone who has gone to a $50,000 a year private school for 12 years and is a third generation college student. And so far, that they basically are just coming out right there and saying, now, those who would argue for the return to being test required everywhere would probably also, in many cases, would also probably make the argument, not all, but some, that standards are standards are standards, i.e. the standardized test, formerly known as the standardized assessment test, the SAT, is no longer known as the standardized assessment. It's now known as it's been known as many things. Standardized aptitude test, it was known as first. And then I think they changed it to standardized assessment test, and then they just called it the SAT. It means nothing anymore. The SAT really stands for nothing. It's just a brand name now, but sort of like KFC. Does it really stand for Kentucky Fried Chicken? No. I guess the powers that be at KFC or whoever owned the conglomerate or the private equity firm that owns it, depending on the year and the trends and the branding, they just call it KFC. It's not actually Kentucky. It's not actually fried, and it's not actually chicken anymore. So it's sort of the same idea. The SAT is just the SAT, but I can't make this joke for the ACT. The ACT, I think, still stands for something. But the point being, the word standardized used to mean standardized. Harvard is basically saying that it will review SAT and ACT scores, but our consideration of SAT or ACT scores and what you earn on those will not be standardized in any way, shape, or form. Similar to what I think we discussed previously with another institution recently in a video, that things that used to be objective are no longer objective. So Harvard will consider your SAT scores in the context of everything else in your application. So that still is Harvard's way of basically getting around what they were always concerned about having to get around, which is not holding everyone to the same standard. Harvard does not want to, and no Ivy League school currently wants to hold all applicants to the same standard. Because if an Ivy League school had to hold all applicants to the same standard, the student population at these schools would be vastly different. It depends on the standard, of course. Now, if the standard was everyone needs to have a 1580 on the SAT or higher, then in that scenario, the student population would be a whole lot different in terms of complexion, in terms of nationality, in terms of sex. It would be very different. Now, if the standard was everyone had to have a 4.5 GPA on a 5.0 scale, again, it would be a very different complexion class, a very different sex-based class. It would be a very different nationality-based class, again, depending on the GPA. It's very different than the SAT or ACT. If the standard is whoever has had the most adversity in life, again, if that's the standard, if that's one standard, again, the whole demographic population and breakdown of the school would be very different. So Harvard can't have one standard. They've refused to. They refuse to have one standard, and all the Ivy League schools refuse to have one standard of admission. So that's why they have thrown out words like holistic in the past. And, I don't know if they're even using the word holistic anymore, particularly at Harvard. A lot of colleges obviously still use the word holistic. But regardless of what language they're currently using in Mr. Fitzsimmons' office there at Harvard, at the end of the day, that is a smokescreen, as I've indicated previously, for Harvard is practicing currently, whether it's calling it this or not, equitable admissions. That's what all the Ivy League schools practice, equitable admissions. Equitable admissions is they decide what the appropriate demographic background of the student population should be, and then they work backwards to achieve it. All right, so that's it. That's what you're working with. So in some cases, your SAT score is going to matter a heck of a lot, especially if it's high and they already wanted to accept you. That's going to help you. If it's low and they already wanted to reject you, they're going to reject you. If it's low, but they really want to accept you, it could still help you, or it won't hurt you. So that's how it works in the Ivy League these days. And of course, there are, many other elements, essays, some schools interview still, letters of recommendation, resumes, all that fun stuff, all of which, again, I encourage you to try to have as strong as humanly possible. And you can watch my other videos or work with me one-on-one to learn more about how you can make those as robust and muscular as possible. But at the end of the day, do not think that this decision by Harvard or any of the schools that have gone back to being test required suddenly means that meritocracy is back in style or in vogue, as in, if meritocracy, of course, that's an open question as to what that really means, depending on the speaker of it or the listener of it or the reader of it. But if you define meritocracy as one standard of excellence, let's say, no school practices that I've mentioned on this video today, because all of them have different standards for different applicants depending on what else they learn about the applicant. And that's just how we roll in the world of selective college admissions in the United States in 2024. So again, the big takeaway, Harvard is the fourth Ivy League school to go test required again in the 2024-2025 admission cycle, which basically cuts the Ivy League in two. Harvard, Dartmouth, Brown, and Yale are test required. Princeton, Penn, Columbia, and Cornell remain one way, shape, or form being test optional, or in the case of some schools at Cornell, test free. But basically, and of course, Columbia has previously announced in the last calendar year that they will in perpetuity be test optional, and they have no plans to ever return. But again, just a few hours ago, Harvard had said that at least for 2 more cycles, it would remain test optional. So anything is subject to change with new leadership, new pressures from different individuals or donors, etc. So we will keep you up to date here on this YouTube channel as new policies and procedures come out that could affect you or your student as he or she navigates navigate the selective college admissions process in the United States of America. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your family and friends, and also consider subscribing to my channel if you feel like you would like or want one-on-one college admissions coaching at any point throughout the college admissions process, or maybe throughout the entire college admissions process. Please go to my website, which is collegemeister.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and most importantly, stay stress-free throughout the entire college admissions process.